Everyone, thank you so much for seating with us today. There's a few people I have to mention that you'll see moving around. We have Diana Aguilar Flores over here, which is our digital note taker, and you'll see her doing some wonderful notes on today's sessions. We have our documentarians, Dudley Alexis and Anderson Gill, who are around filming. And then we have our amazing photographer, Nicole Gumbeo, who will be photographing everyone today. All righty. So this first panel is Resilience and Justice, Community Solutions to Addressing Coastal Resilience. In your little pamphlet, you will see a little summary of what they're going to be going over today. We have Dr. Kevin Grove from the Department of Global and Social Cultural Studies, joined by Sandra Dennis, the Executive Director of Miami Worker Center, Carolyn Donaldson, the Vice Chairperson for Grace, Grove Rights, and Community Equity, Nicole Crooks, the Community Engagement Manager for Catalyst Miami, and Dr. Emal Ganapati from the Department of Public Policy and Administration. If you could please give them all a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you, David, and thank you, everyone, for coming out, and thank you, Samuel, for that wonderful performance. As David noted, my name is Kevin Grove. I'm a professor of geography in the Global and Social Cultural Studies Department in the Green School of International Public Affairs here at FIU. And it's been an honor and a privilege to work with our community partners throughout the life of the Commons for Justice project. Our collaborators are some of the most tireless and dedicated folks out there. And we in the FIU community are extremely fortunate that they've chosen to dedicate their time and energies to be part of this project. And I'm especially honored to be able to chair this panel on resilience and justice, to be joined by some truly renowned advocates on stage here, some absolute legends. Community resilience, community and resilience are going to be more important and more necessary than ever, as Samuel taught us. We're facing overlapping social, economic, cultural, and environmental crises, which are making resilience and justice more necessary than ever. As we've seen time and again in disasters such as Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and the Gulf Coast in Louisiana and Mississippi in 2005, Hurricanes Maria and Irma in Puerto Rico in 2017, and more recently with the devastation across Appalachian communities from Hurricane Helene, more intense tropical storms disproportionately impact powerful communities targeted for oppression. But we delude ourselves if we think disaster is limited to the storm. As the anthropologist Yarmar Bonilla remarked when discussing Hurricane Maria's impacts on Puerto Rico, the disaster is colonialism. What she means is that hurricanes and subsequent earthquakes amplify everyday experiences of infrastructure collapse, hardship, disruption, uncertainty, and dispossession that were already a regular part of many Puerto Ricans' lives because of centuries of Spanish and US colonialism. At the same time, Bonilla also reminds us of Puerto Ricans' long histories of creatively making space for community, togetherness, love, and joy within and beyond coloniality's dehumanizing impacts. So the idea that disaster is not an exceptional event, but is part of the everyday experience of powerful communities targeted for oppression is just as relevant in Miami as it is in Puerto Rico. Many of our collaborators in the Commons for Justice project, and many seated with me here in this panel today, have been on the front lines for a long time, fighting to defend their communities from disinvestment and displacement. And these pressures have only intensified in recent years as real estate speculators and developers, high on the financial meth of cryptocurrency, have been ramping up their efforts to displace communities in Little Haiti, Overtown, Alapata, West Grove, and others to strike it big in the next Wynwood or Design District. And these predatory practices are the everyday disaster many of our collaborators deal with each day. But far too often, prevailing approaches to resilience and local and regional economic development accept these everyday violences as background noise, as perhaps unfortunate but unavoidable and thus acceptable parts of the way real estate markets operate in Miami. And this is one of the core problems that the Commons for Justice program has been engaging. What would resilience look like if we based the concept of resilience on the experiences, knowledge, and desires of these communities, rather than prioritizing the needs and desires of property markets, local government tax receipts, developers, and property owners? What if we focus not on the resilience of the urban system of Miami as it exists now, an urban system whose future is dependent on communities sacrificing their neighborhoods and their futures? What would happen if we instead focused on the resilience of those communities? What would climate justice look like if we started from the premise that these communities have a right to the city, a right to exist, a right to space, and the right to have a future? No single project can ever hope to address problems as complex and ingrained into the weft and weave of South Florida. But we've collaboratively worked to create a shared space, a commons for justice, where we might be free to pose these questions and think about resilience and justice in terms of disinvestment, displacement, the extraction of wealth, and the creative capacities to create and defend place. The freedom to think differently about the future. This is authentic, intellectual, practical, and academic freedom. The abolitionist geographer Ruth Wilson Gilmore reminds us that freedom is a place. The threat that both future and everyday disasters pose to the communities that have invited us to work with them is a threat to their freedom. So where is climate justice in a resilient Miami? What I've learned from the Commons for Justice program is that we must learn from the communities and our collaborators who already know far better than us what resilience means and what it requires. Because for decades, they've been living with and resisting the everyday disasters of economic and environmental injustice in South Florida. Freedom is a place, and climate justice in Miami requires all of us to defend the places powerful communities targeted for oppression have constructed for themselves through generations of labor, love, resistance, and care. So I'm excited to discuss these issues and more with our panelists and everyone today. So to introduce the panelists, I'd like to go around and just ask everyone to introduce themselves and describe how you approach these themes of climate justice and resilience in your work. So, Ms. Denise?
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Dennis. I'm the Executive Director of the Miami Workers Center. I have the privilege and honor of building power alongside tenants and workers from Miami-Dade County in the city of Miami, in the communities in the city of Miami, particularly Liberty City, Little Haiti, Alapata as well. We're doing some work in Little Havana. We also do some work in the city of North Miami. That's where a majority of our base building, our efforts are actually put right now. I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm a child of Haitian freedom fighters. I say this because I think that there's so much expertise that comes from people who have migrated to Miami, who have fleed not only political and social instabilities, but also have weathered the storm and have so much to learn from, to teach us if we would listen. And so our experience as in this project has been so special. Miami Workers Center celebrated 25 years of power building in Miami. In 25 years, some of the projects that we have done includes a noise wall. If you look at 95 in our urban corridor, there didn't used to be noise walls down 95. And so communities would experience so much pollution and so much noise, could not go to sleep at night. Cars going 70 miles an hour would end up in people's driveways, crashing into their houses because there was no protections for our people. That is the legacy of base building organizations, power building organizations in our communities. And through this project, we were able to memorialize that, to really, I would say we came up with a documentary. We did many, there was an exhibit that we did with Nadesh Green of Community Justice Project. We did, I would say, we sat with our elders who've been doing this work for 40, 50 odd years in Miami-Dade County and learned from them. And I think the issue that we see specifically as it relates to the intersection of housing and climate is that there is an erasure of our people. And if we don't document, if we don't talk to our elders, it would be as if we never existed. And so that is the work that we did. And we also know that this fight for housing is a working class fight. We're fighting developers who think it is better to build high rises that none of us can afford, that also actually puts more pressure on our environment. This is why we're seeing the flooding that we're seeing, right? Versus whether or not we believe actually housing is a human right. Right? Do we believe that fundamentally in one of the wealthiest nations in the world, that people deserve a place to live? We believe that in all our hearts and our souls, and that's why we do the work that we do. I just want to say something, and I'll pass the mic. I got an opportunity to go to COP. It's a big meeting. It happened in Scotland when I went, and had the opportunity to sit with some elders, some indigenous people who are protecting the land in the Amazon. And this elder woman said to me, and I'll never forget it, she said, in the fight between Mother Nature and man, Mother Nature will win. And she said that it is, in her wisdom, she said, it is up to us to figure out if we want to survive, because Mother Nature will. And so I say that many of our ancestors, many of our elders will tell us about how to be one, how to protect, especially in a place like Miami. And what I will say is we are leaning on siding with the developers, siding with everything that is counter to what the beautiful wisdom that came to our elder. There is a fight. There is a struggle. The storms are stronger. It is hotter. And if we don't take this seriously, we will not survive. And the only way that we will survive is if we put hand in hand, heart in heart. If we do this together, at Miami Worker Center, we say, we all we got. We count on one another. Communities protect one another. They show up first. We're our first responders. And so we're equipping our people to know what that looks like, what that will take every day in Miami's communities. Thank y'all so much.
Good morning. My name is Carolyn Donaldson. I am the Vice Chair for Grove Rights and Community Equity. I think, needless to say, while I no longer live in Coconut Grove, most people think that I do. After actually 45 years working in corporate America and the pharmaceutical sector, I retired to come back to Coconut Grove and find out that I did not recognize the community that I grew up in. That community has been resilient in trying to hold on, but like I think you're going to hear from some of my colleagues, we're all experiencing very similar situations. I came back to a community which is the oldest community in Miami-Dade County, to find out that even with some of the original founding members that signed the charter to create the city of Miami, we're struggling to hold on to the existence of that community. And certainly issues within the community center around housing, it centers around gentrification, which has become the ugly word in a lot of our communities as we fight for our existence. Grove Rights and Community Equity actually came together. Hello? Let me try that one. Testing, can you hear me? Okay. Actually came together as originally a task force of community churches, homeowners, tenants within the community in order to say that we've got to fight if we are going to exist. And so it was with that vein that we formed Grove Rights and Community Equity, to say that we needed to become a strong voice in the community and make a difference in the community. And how have we done that as an organization? We then look for what would be the tools that could assist us in this process. Many of you may recognize Grove Rights and Community Equity by the term GRACE, which we coined ourselves because we had a huge representation of churches. And in my capacity as financial officer for Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church, founded in 1895, we decided that we would absolutely be a voice and assist in leading this charge. And so with that, we have done a number of things, because for us to exist in a city that we founded and that our members signed off on the charter, we ended up in a situation where we had to actually reach out and sue the city of Miami. And I know a lot of people will say, you'll never win in your fight against the city of Miami, but I sit here today to say, as vice chair of Grace, we won. We won, and we won because the challenge was real. The challenge was real, and we had the receipts. One of the things I learned coming out of corporate America, get your receipts. Get your receipts, because that's going to validate some of the things that you're saying. And our argument against gerrymandering, which happened right in the face of us sitting in City Hall, went as far as the U.S. Supreme Court. But it came down for us victoriously. So we have that. A challenge that we're facing right now, because we filed on the heels of that a HUD claim. Because again, getting our receipts, going down to City Hall, we realized that more time was spent tracking trees and where those trees sat and what our tree canopy was in Coconut Grove. They knew absolutely everything in every tree and every oak that had ever been moved, but they could not answer for us, where are the people? Coconut Grove used to be represented 90% blacks. It's down to about 30% right now. So where are those people? Did anybody take the time to track where the people are and where they went and where they were pushed out of a community and history that had been around for a long time? So we took the time to do that. And with developers coming in, and that still is the case, we're right now looking at 6 major developments along Grand and Douglas, including some that are county-sponsored, some that are city-sponsored. And so, you know, you certainly raise the question, where will the people be once we're done? We were a community of homeowners at one time. And so what's going to replace all those homeowners will be high-rises. The question is, are they affordable? The average house in Coconut Grove right now is over $1 million. From owners that goes centuries back, because my church, the oldest church, 1895, we still stand. So we want our community to stand with us. I know you guys are going to have some questions for us, but those are some of the things that Grace have brought to the table to say that we want to save that community, or as much of it as we can. And finally, community benefits agreements was also one of the other tools that we've put into place to say, with the appropriate covenants, we can lend some level of protection to the history that we know we have as immigrants from the Bahamas, and also those individuals that migrated from Georgia, the Carolinas, Mississippi, North Florida. We're here to support.
Good afternoon. Hello? Can you hear that? Hello? That's better? Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Crooks, and I'm first must have to just say that I'm so grateful to be able to be here, to give honor to the Creator, and then also just to express my gratitude and deep humility in being able to be here on the land of those who were here before us, and just giving thanks for all of the sacrifices, and also acknowledging that not only are we on land that belonged to other people, many of those people are still here. It's just like, it's like going and seeing somebody walk around in your coat and then they're taking over the coat and acting like that there's no problem. And so first and foremost, wanting to set that tone and just give honor and thanks for all of those who came before us. And I also stand here as a descendant of many in my own lineage that I know. Some I know their names, many I do not. So just wanting to say that I'm the daughter of Jacqueline Smith Crooks, and I'm the granddaughter of Maddie and Winona, going all the way back to my great-great-great-grandmother, Mandy, who was an enslaved African woman who was also a midwife. And so I'm standing on shoulders of some powerful women whom I'm grateful for. And my name is Nicole. I have the honor of being able to work at Catalyst Miami. And I serve alongside a powerful group of people, the Overtown Community Champions. And so I stand here representing all of them. I also want to acknowledge that in as much as we are striving to educate and build power within the Overtown community specifically is where I live and serve, and have been able to raise my children, and the honor of being able to work through Catalyst there with my community members. The reality is that before the Black folks were in Overtown, the indigenous folks were in Overtown and were gentrified out. Either gentrified out or pushed out and killed. And so I think it's important for us to always acknowledge that as well. And so through this work, one of the things that I'm so grateful for, being able to have had this experience through this partnership, is the fact that we have been able to come together to talk about our collective struggle. I think here in Miami, one of the things that I've noticed so much, and my family is one of those folks that was in Coconut Grove, and there's no longer, so count us. But so many times we're working in these silos, right? And we think that the struggle is in Coconut Grove, or the struggle is in Overtown, or the struggle is in Liberty City, and we're fighting these fights on our own, and it's a common struggle. But we're segmented and splintered in terms of the power. And so for this, we were able to come together because it's those same things. Our children and people don't know our history in Overtown, just the same as TIC, just the same as just so many other places. And so being able to really come together and say, okay, this is our history, this is why it's important. And being able to tell our stories in our own voices, through our own narratives. There's a quote that I often quote, that whoever tells your story owns your destiny. And so it's a matter of being able to own our own destinies. Today, when I walked in, I was happy to see Ms. Betty. And I know we were out on an airboat way back. And we had a conversation about the fight for social justice, and the fight for reclaiming our spaces, and the fight to exist, really. And one of the things, and I don't know if you remember, but you were saying, you know, the fight it's there, it's real, and there are some folks that will be doing that. And as for me, I will be praying and educating. And so through our work in this space, that's what I'm most grateful for, is that we've been able to pray, elevate, educate, and continue to regroup, because, you know, it's not gonna get any easier. That's the truth of the matter, especially in light of recent occurrences. But really to be able to stand alongside one another and realize our interconnectedness and the fact that we have so much more in common than we do different. And the more we do things where we're working together toward our common goals, and at the core of everything, making sure that humanity and love and dignity and sovereignty is elevated above all things, I think there's so much that we will be able to do. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Emel Ganapari. I'm a professor of public policy and administration at FIU. I also direct the social science laboratory at the Extreme Events Institute, and I have the difficult job of following these incredible women and my colleague, Kevin. A lot of my work, my perspective is going to be a little different as an academic. So Kevin asked us, what our approach to climate justice and resilience is. And I was thinking about this, what has affected me personally, my approach. But let me briefly explain what I've done in terms of my research. A lot of my time these days is spent on the Surfside building collapse investigation that is being undertaken by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So I'm part of the federal technical investigation. I lead the social science evidence collection efforts there. So we're basically doing interviews, focus groups, and archival research to help out engineers figure out why the building collapsed and make recommendations to Congress on what needs to be done to ensure building safety, condo safety in the future. And I also do a lot of work in Puerto Rico, and I see some familiar faces here. Last month, we had an event. We had a photo voice exhibit of two communities. Community members actually shared the photos that they took in the Puerto Rican communities of Comerío and Luisa. That talked about their disaster realities, their experiences, their hopes and dreams. I've done a lot of work here in mainland USA besides Puerto Rico as well, South Florida all the way down to the Keys, but also in Haiti and Nepal. And I'm originally from Turkey. That's where I started studying disasters. And before I started focusing on disasters in terms of my research area, I was interested in international development. So some of the scholars that I have studied, their works of, they left an imprint on me. So I'll briefly talk about their approaches and what it meant for my work related to disasters, climate justice, resilience issues. My work also builds on what Kevin described. So like you, Kevin, I came to learn that, okay, disasters are not these unexpected extreme events, right? They are part of our daily lives, our lived experiences. But also, again, because of some of the scholars that I have read the works of, I kind of summarize my approach to resilience issues as cautious optimism. So this cautious optimism has three pillars. So the first one is about how we define those affected by disasters. The second one relates to whose realities count. And the third one is about our hope for the future. So let me summarize them in a little bit of detail. The first one is about how we view those affected by disasters. I've come to realize that the terms that we use are often very unfortunate. So when we refer to those affected by disasters, if you look at the mainstream disaster literature, we talk about them as victims, right? It's a really loaded term. And we all know that, yes, these people are, at risk, and they have hard time in terms of preparing for recovering from disasters. But at the same time, they have innate capabilities, right? They know their realities. They know what issues they face. And oftentimes they explain their complex issues in much better terms than we academics can. And they know what solutions are right for them. And they're active agents of change. They do things. I mean, like what you see here, the leaders of communities around South Florida, and people who are at risk, yes, they have to deal with a lot of systemic issues that place them at risk, but at the same time, they are active agents of change. So this has been like the first pillar of my overall approach to resilience issues. And the second one, I've been influenced by the work of Robert Chambers. He was an international development practitioner / scholar who did a lot of work in rural areas in different international contexts. And he wrote a book called Whose Reality Counts? So he was asking about, okay, so is it the expert reality that count, whether they are academics or policymakers or practitioners, right? So is it our realities that count, or is it the realities of the people that we are trying to help? So what he says is that, whoever considers them as experts, we have to put ourselves as the last and put those who have been who are the beneficiaries in the context of international development, but in the climate justice context is the people who are at risk, right, and are affected by disasters. We have to put them first and make sure that their realities count instead of imposing our own realities on these individuals. The third pillar of my work, it has more to do with how hopeful we are about the future. I know we are going through really challenging times, as Nicole also mentioned, and there's much to worry for, and we know, there are daily struggles for many people. At the same time, we have to have a bias for hope, and what Albert Hirschman, a development economist, calls possibilism, bias for hope. So these are his terms. So when I read his work, again, earlier in my career, that had a lot of imprint on me and my work. Despite the challenges that we have to deal with in climate justice issues, I think we still have a lot to hope for, and it's better to have a bias for hope, right, than getting depressed and burying our head in the sand.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emil. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. I want to take the time. I think we've got about a little less than 10 minutes, but I know I want to turn the floor over. I've certainly been learning so much from all of you in the project, beyond the project, and here today. I want to open up the floor for any questions that people might have. So, please.
If anyone has any questions, please raise your hand, and Camilla will walk over to you.
Hello? Yep. Okay. So my question is, you all are very involved with your communities. My main question is, how have you had to navigate, being in Florida with a state government that at times is very at odds with community efforts? I know one big one that sticks out to me is their preemption of heat protection for workers, especially agricultural workers. How has that sort of opposition faced? How have you faced that opposition, and how has it impacted your work?
Sure. I'm happy to respond to that. Our partner, there are 2 worker centers, now 3 in Miami. Miami Worker Center, We Count, and Beyond the Bars. And so I want to say that when we talk about preemption is something that we all need to actually get into the fight. And so what we've seen is that industry, big pharma, big ag, a lot of folks, construction, anybody who really hires a lot of construction, outdoor workers, really taint that campaign that was really community-led. I would question us specifically at an institution like the Florida International University, who are we in relationship with? And what's their relationship to our people versus private interest? And until we're able to ask those questions, until we're able to hold people accountable, we're gonna see development, we're gonna see big ag, big construction continue to win. I dare to say that until we see the county, until we see universities really struggle with their relationship to these companies, we'll continue to leave. We'll say as organizers, we always have a fight in us. Hope is a discipline. We're gonna always step up to the table. I think what we're seeing is actually, we need much more of a broader tent. Will you come? The doors of the church are open. Will you come with your dollars? Will you come with your partners? Will you come with the relationships that we know that you all have? Because no one's funding base building, organizing work in Miami in a real way. I think the only funder that's really, I'm talking about systems level work, is Miami Foundation. And Miami Foundation is a small foundation. Health Foundation does some specifically to maternity, it's specifically around the Black maternity mortality stuff. But when you're thinking about the intersection of climate and housing, we need your dollars, we need your relationships, specifically folks who know people, we need y'all to talk to them and hold them accountable. We live in a state where people don't want to talk about climate change. We act as if people are not dying in our fields. Until all of us in this room, in the university, really feel compelled to stand up for it, we're going to continue to see this happen.
I think from the community issues that we have addressed, our approach had to go the legal path. And I would say primarily because we needed to focus on how we could potentially make policy change. And so in order to do that, we just felt that we had no other option. And when you look at the kinds of issues, because we have issues dating back to the 40s and 50s, starting with like Old Smoky, which was the old incinerator that dumped ash onto the community for years, and it was known but covered up, and there was no level of remediation that was done. A trolley garage was going to be placed in the middle of the Black community to service all of the surrounding communities because they did not want that level of exposure to the trolley. So it has been systemic throughout. And so at some point, the only way we were able to say, stop, enough is enough, is to say, we're willing to take some legal action and challenge you on policy that's in place and decisions that are in place. And we can prevail if we take the right route and with a clear understanding of some of the issues and concerns.
I want to clarify for you, really quickly, for folks who did not know that campaign, that was Kate Kalar from We Count. If you don't know We Count, get to know We Count. They're doing amazing work in South Dade, but also now in Miami. So Kate Kalar came up, it was a heat provision so that people can get rest, shade, water. Thank you. Rest, shade, water, very simple, got very complicated for others. They brought it before the Miami-Dade County Commission. They did not vote that day. They could have. They did not. So folks who live in specific districts, there are elected officials who did not show up for the people that day. I think we should hold that. Before it was able to come back to the commission for a vote, Tallahassee preempted it. There are people in the Miami-Dade County delegation who voted against it. Those are our representatives. Those are our commissioners. To your point, I just wanted to say this and I'll be quiet. We are thinking about how do we target bad actors, name them. Corporate actors, bad construction companies, bad farmers, all that. How do we bring it to light so that we can get into a struggle? Because to the sister's point here, I want to just be honest, we don't have the numbers in Tallahassee to move anything. We have a trifecta, supermajority in every branch, similar to what we have in the country right now, right? We're introducing the country to Florida, right? And so Welcome to Florida. Right? And so it is hard to move any progressive legislation at the state level. And if you do at the local, if you do win some, Big Brother's watching. Right.
Also in Overtown, one of the things that we recognize, not just in Overtown, but one of the things that we recognize is that no one's coming to save us but us. And so really creating the spaces in which we are pulling together our power, recognizing that we do have power, and pulling that power together to address some of the issues that impact us. So for example, when it comes to disaster preparedness, getting community members ready for that, pulling people together within the community, especially when it comes to some of our most vulnerable, i.e. like our elders and some of folks who have been placed at risk. A lot of times we'll say marginalized populations, but it's been very intentional and by design that these populations are marginalized. And so it's building on our power of what we know is powerful, like all that stuff with Big Mom and them, right? That has come and been repackaged and trying to build those spaces back up, being back in community when community has been destroyed intentionally. In Overtown, and as in a lot of historically Black communities, the highway coming through, and here we in Overtown have another iteration of the highway coming through, and so we know that that's not by accident, right? And so it's doing those things. It's calling things out as they are when we talk about systemic racism, structural systemic racism, like calling those things out and calling a thing, naming it. It's about coming together and collaborating. When we talk about collaborations between academia and the community and other spaces, it's an industry. And so there's a lot of healing and acknowledging past and current hurts that must occur as we look at moving forward, right? It's about that accompaniment with being in community and recognizing that, yes, in fact, community who has been able to survive all of this time are the true experts. So what do we do? And they're the experts, and pay the experts as experts. When we do write-ups and journals and all of the things that allow people to boost their salaries in academia, right? Like, how do we turn that into being led by the real experts of community? It's those things, and it's pushing those things even when it's not popular. And it's necessary, right? Like, I have a whole list of things. We can talk later. We don't have time for that, but those are some of them.
I just wanted to add a few things, again, from the academic side. I'm not sure if you're following what is happening in academia, but we also have our own stresses. Some programs are being closed, classes being canceled. We have to really rethink about how we are teaching equity and other issues, diversity, inclusion. What I would suggest is, what I've realized over the years is, of course, there are certain things that are not within your control, but there are things that are within our control. So we have to find creative ways of dealing with these pressures, right? So, for instance, in some of my classes, I do emphasize to students that they have to look at equity. And like, I teach a policy analysis class that helps students understand how to define a problem, how to come up with solutions, and how to evaluate different options so that they can make recommendations to policymakers. So I always tell them you have to look at equity, but define it in your own way, but that definition has to match with who is being impacted by this particular problem, right? So if it is ethnic and racial groups, then maybe you have to define it that way. I don't tell them what it should be, so they figure it out. And I haven't taken that out yet from my course. But I teach another course. It's qualitative methods at the doctoral level. It has nothing to do necessarily with diversity, with equity issues, right? And in one of the classes, I remember I was trying to explain to students that when they collect data and they present, they're learning how to present data. And I was telling them the importance of thick description, providing that rich context, explaining things in a more detailed way. And to explain that, I showed them a segment of MSNBC's Rachel Maddow when she was talking about how Boston has, for the first time in history, has the first female African-American mayor. And, this itself, of course, it's fascinating, right? But then, as you might know, Rachel, she talked for 15 minutes about, to explain that in more detail, to provide the context, and she talked about how the schools were segregated in Boston, and how after the court decisions, the students in African-American neighborhoods had to be bused to white neighborhoods. And then she interviewed, she's actually provided the interview scripts of these kids who went to these schools. They were so scared of taking the buses. I remember she showed an image of an African-American student sitting all alone by herself in the classroom because the white parents, they did not want to send their kids to that school after the busing of African-American students. So I show this to explain the importance of thick description. And then one of the students said, "Professor, you're so brave." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I didn't initially understand what she was trying to say because she was aware of the pressures from higher levels of government on academics. So my course wasn't about equity, as I mentioned earlier, but I find that space, to give them bits and pieces about justice and equity. And also what I find to be helpful in my classes is using different class assignments, like in person, when we do in-person classes, or online, you could do it online too, giving them small group exercises where they actually can build empathy and become more aware of communities' issues. For instance, I ask the students in my emergency management class to do role playing, and some individuals become policymakers, telling community members to relocate because the community is not safe. And this is like a Native American village in coastal Louisiana, where the economy depends on fishing. And then other students play the role of, the tribal members. And there are a lot of videos and a lot of newspaper articles about this particular town. So the students study these stories, the stories of these community members and the policymakers, and they come to class and they do role-playing activities, and that really helps. So again, I don't have to tell them what to do, but it's through these kind of exercises, or again, exposing them to bits and pieces throughout my classes, that I try to educate them about climate justice issues.
Well, thank you so much for those answers, everyone, and thank you again. It's been wonderful sharing the panel with you. On to David.